Today's recipe calls for pumpkin puree. I'm going to show you how to make pillow soft pumpkin muffins. This recipe is super simple. It's so easy. I'm going to show you how to do it 2 ways. That's how easy it is. So grab your bestie, your Ugg boots, and a PSL, and let's get started. The first thing we need to do is preheat our oven to 425 Fahrenheit or 218 Celsius. A little pro tip, if you want the most accurate measurements, weigh out the ingredients. Also, it's just so much more efficient and faster. We're going to be making 2 different styles of pumpkin muffins today. They both will have close to the same ingredients, but with a few slight changes. The first muffin will have oil, and the other will have brown butter, and a secret but not so secret ingredient to it. More on that later though. You'll grab a medium-sized holding device and a fine mesh strainer. The first thing we'll add to our bowl is 1 1/2 cups or 180 grams of all-purpose flour. The next thing we'll add is half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of allspice, 1 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, and lastly, half a teaspoon of baking powder. Now we'll sift all of our ingredients together. Doing this will catch any flour clumps and slightly bring everything into one giant dry mess of goods. Push through or break up any flour clumps that you see. Once you've done that, grab a whisk and whisk your face off to ensure all of your dry ingredients get to know one another. The last dry spice we need to add to the bowl is a 1/4 teaspoon of fresh ground nutmeg, or pre-ground will work as well. Yep, that looks like about a 1/4 teaspoon. Now that we have all of our dry ingredients forced to be together, we'll move on to bringing all of our wet ingredients into one sloppy heap. We'll first work on making the pumpkin muffins with the oil, or PMWO for short. Not so catchy, but you understand, right? In a fresh bowl, we'll add 1 1/4 cup or 280 grams of pumpkin puree. You want to ensure that you use pure pumpkin puree and not pumpkin pie filling. Next, we'll add half a cup or 100 grams worth of dark brown sugar. After that, we'll add half a cup or 100 grams of granulated sugar. Next, we'll add 2 large eggs that are room temperature weather. It's best practice to crack them into a separate container. This way, if you get any shell, you can pick it out a whole lot easier. The next thing we'll add to our bowl is a 1/4 cup or 60 mils of milk of your choice, of course. After that, the next thing we're going to add is 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And the last and final thing we need to add is half a cup or 120 mils of a neutral tasting oil. Now that the oil has been added to our holding apparatus, you're going to grab a whisk and you're going to whisk your face off to bring everything together into one nice smooth consistency. Now that we have an orange liquid in the bowl, we'll add the dry ingredients to our wet ingredients. I like to do this in 2 sets. Add half of the dry and give it a few turns with a whisk to start bringing things into one. After you have the first half in the bowl, add the rest of the dry and mix everything together until you can't see any more flour and things are nice and smooth. It's really important not to overmix the batter. Overmixing will activate the gluten development, making things more dense. We want something that's light, airy, and fluffy in texture. Also, pro tip, run your whisk along the side and bottom of the bowl to ensure you get all the goodies. In the end, this is what your muffin batter should look like. Now that we have the PMWO batter made, we'll move on and make our caramelized pumpkin brown butter maple muffins, or aka CPBBMM. That's a bit of a doozy and really not much shorter actually. The butter muffins will follow the same wet ingredients list. I'm going to cut the granulated sugar in half for this one though. This time we'll add a 1/4 cup or 50 grams of granulated sugar. Before we add the pumpkin puree to the wet, we're going to grab a medium-sized saucepan so we can caramelize the pumpkin puree. Gently throw the saucepan over low to medium heat. Cooking the puree will intensify the pumpkin flavor and bring more depth to our muffins. When you're caramelizing your pumpkin puree, you want it to be flat in the saucepan. This way it makes the most contact with the pan to get the best cook on it. You don't want to overcook the pumpkin. I cooked mine a touch too long and pulled out too much moisture, which if you end up doing this, it's not that big of a deal. I'll show you how to fix it later on. When testing the recipe, cooking the pumpkin for 5 to 6 minutes or until things became slightly darker in color and also became nice and fragrant in smell. This range of time was the perfect amount. While the pumpkin is going, we'll grab a small saucepan so we can start making the brown butter. Toss in 12 tablespoons or 113 grams of unsalted butter into the pan ski and then throw it over low heat. You might end up with a little left over, which is fine. We're accounting for the water that we'll lose when we go to brown it. We'll let the butter cook for 7 to 8 minutes or until it becomes a nice golden brown color and you see a
a ton of small little brown flakes at the bottom of your pan, which are all the milk solids becoming nice and caramelized, or browned I should say. You'll also know when it's done when it has this intense buttery and nutty smell to it, which is the absolute best smell ever. They should turn it into a cologne or maybe a candle, probably a candle actually. Now that the pumpkin is done cooking, we'll throw it on a flat holding device and spread it into a thin layer. This way it cools down a lot faster. Make a few cuts or lines into it to help release the steam. Once you've done that, toss it in the fridge box to help it cool down. Now that we've turned the butter brown, we'll ensure we have the correct amount. Measure out half a cup or 120 mils. Take off the foam and add in all those little brown specks of goodness. Those are where all the magical deliciousness is held. You want to get as much of that as possible to add to your muffins. If you have any brown butter left, it'll make for a great unhealthy snack. Just don't tell your doctor. This is what you're looking for, is something like this, a ton of little bitty browned milk solids. It's important that your butter and pumpkin puree are completely cooled down before adding to your wet ingredients. You don't want to make scrambled egg muffins with a hint of pumpkin in them, which doesn't sound that great, but you know, don't knock it till you try it, I guess, as they say. Next, add the butter and ensure you get all the little goodies. The last thing we'll add is our secret ingredient, also known as pure maple syrup, which I'm sure you already figured that out because of the shorthand long form name. I added 5 tablespoons of maple goodness. This is why we cut the granulated sugar in half, because this will bring some sweetness to the table and it'll also bring that delicious flavor profile. Now that we have the Canadian juice in the bowl, we'll add the dry ingredients next. You're going to repeat the same process as before. If your muffin batter ends up being a bit stiff like mine has because you overcooked the pumpkin puree, add 2 to 3 tablespoons of milk and a small splash of butter. Add enough extra liquid to make your batter smoother and slightly thinner in consistency. You want it to look and feel the same as the muffins with the oil. Or you can totally skip this and just do it the right way the first go round. Now that we have both of our batters made, it's time to get our bake on. Dun 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 dun! I don't have money for special effects, sorry. Grab a standard muffin maker pan and line it with some muffin papers. This will make it easier to get the muffins out of the pan and will make the cleanup process way easier. Fill the liners 3/4 of the way full, which is almost close to being full. You want to leave a small space. This way they don't overflow so that they can rise and we can get that nice muffin top on them. You can use any type of traveling device of your choice to get your muffin batter into your cups. You can use a scooper, a spoon, or make it rain batter into those muffin liners. Use whatever method that works best for you. If you accidentally get any muffin batter on your pan, it's really important that you clean it off because once it bakes on the pan, it burns and it becomes super hard to clean off later. Now that we have our muffin liners filled, we'll toss them in our preheated oven. Both sets of muffins will cook at the same exact temps and will follow the same process of baking. Now that our muffins are in the hot firebox, we'll set a timer for 5 minutes. Baking the muffins at the high temp for a short time will help them get that first initial rise so we can get that delicious muffin top. After the 5 minutes is up, we'll turn the oven down to 350 Fahrenheit or 177 Celsius to finish baking the muffins off. It's important that you leave the muffins in the oven when you're turning it down. No reason to open that door and release all that hot, steamy air. Once the heat is turned down, we'll bake the muffins an additional 10 to 15 minutes or until a toothpick or cake tester comes out clean when checked. Times might vary depending on how hot your oven runs. I found that the muffins with the brown butter baked for around 12 minutes and that was the perfect time, whereas the muffins with the oil went for the full 15 minutes. I recommend that you start with around 10 to 11 minutes, then check them. Once the timer has gone off, you're going to pull those little delicious pumpkin pillows out of that heat box and we'll check them with a toothpick. You're going to insert that wooden stick into the center of the muffin. If it comes out clean, then you know they're done. Once you've checked them with a toothpick and they're all good to go, we're going to let them hang out and cool down for 10 to 15 minutes in the pan. Doing so will allow them to completely set up so we can eat them. Once cooled all the way, you can eat them for breakfast or as a snack or with a pumpkin spice latte on the side, or you can just eat the muffin top and give someone the rest of it. Whatever you decide to do, just enjoy.
Alright, now that our pumpkin muffins are done, and I got my sweet trusty old PSL, let's give these things the old taste-a-roo. So looking at them, they came out nice and aesthetically pleasing. Here's the oil one, came out just a touch darker and kind of slightly smaller. And here's our brown butter one. They came out just a little bit bigger and the color on them is a bit more orange, which is kind of surprising. but given this one was in the oven for a little bit longer than this one, either way they look super tasty, so let's give them a shot. First, we'll try the oil one. Smells really tasty, smells like cinnamon and pumpkin and all the fall goodness. The top is the best, obviously. Our pumpkin muffin with the oil came out super tasty. That color on the top of our muffin from being in the oven brings a little bit of caramelization flavor to the table. Overall, it's really tasty. It's slightly sweet, and that cinnamon shines through really well to bring some flavor to the table, and it just reminds me of fall so much. And texture-wise, it's nice and airy, fluffy, tender, and everybody hates it, but it's definitely really moist. Overall, it's super tasty, and it's just well balanced. So let's get a palate cleanser. No, just kidding, there's nothing in here, so we'll get a drink. Now let's try our caramelized pumpkin brown butter maple muffin. Also smells super fall-y like. Again, get that top, some of that center. Let's get it. Our caramelized pumpkin brown butter maple muffin, aka CPBBMM, came out so much better. It's more complex and has more depth and flavor in my opinion. We get a bit of nuttiness from that brown butter, then that maple slightly shines through to bring that fall flavor, and maple and pumpkin go so well together. And of course that cinnamon shines through really well. Then it's slightly sweet but not too sweet, it's just well balanced. And also of course this one is super airy, fluffy, tender, and of course it's moist. Then we get a little bit of that caramelization flavor from the top of the muffin as well, and then it brings that nice crunch factor to it as well. Then we get a little bit of that caramelization from our pumpkin too. Overall, these both came out super tasty. These muffins are super easy to make. There's not a whole lot to it by any means. I recommend that you make both of them, the brown butter ones and the oil ones, and compare the two, and then down below in the comments let me know which one you think is the best. I think the brown butter ones are better, so maybe just make those ones, but do whatever you want. And the spices on this are super interchangeable. Maybe add some mace or some homemade pumpkin spice mix, or add some molasses to bring even more flavor. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'm over this fall baking stuff, so we'll see you in the winter or maybe the spring, or who knows. We'll see you on the next one. Which one is better? In my personal opinion, I think the brown one, they're both brown. Of course you get that cinnamon then, add some mace or add some pumpkin spice latte. No, you don't want to do that. In my opinion, I think the brown one. Again with the brown. Flavor wise, it's a bit cinnamony. You like best. I think the brown one. Again with the brown, bro. Super tasty. And my battery's gonna die, so I gotta switch it up.